Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Savannah, Georgia. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're hearing this narration. The year was 1847 when the prestigious Harrington Plantation stood as a monument to wealth amidst sprawling cotton fields and ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The Harrington estate, with its imposing three-story Georgian mansion, represented 5 generations of prosperity built upon the brutal institution of human bondage, where Colonel James Harrington, a distinguished veteran of the Seminole Wars and widower of 7 years, maintained a household of 47 enslaved individuals and a reputation for exacting standards that bordered on tyrannical. The Colonel's unmarried daughter, Miss Eleanor Harrington, aged 26 and thus considered well beyond her prime years for securing a suitable match, occupied the east wing of the Grand House, where she spent her days in relative isolation. Having withdrawn from Savannah society following her 3rd failed courtship, a withdrawal that coincided with her father's increasing preoccupation with expanding his holdings westward through land speculation in the newly annexed Texas territories. Among the household staff, 12-year-old Isaiah occupied a precarious position of privilege, having been selected from the field quarters at age 9 due to his uncommonly nimble fingers. Careful attention to detail, and quiet, watchful intelligence that the house mistress, Mrs. Pemberton, recognized as valuable traits for indoor service. According to household ledgers recently digitized by the Savannah Historical Society in 2018, the first documented assignment of Isaiah to Miss Eleanor's personal quarters appears on August 17, 1847, with the notation, "Boy to repair bed frame, East Wing, Miss E's instruction," an innocuous entry that would later be referenced in multiple investigations as the genesis of a relationship that would ultimately lead to bloodshed, madness, and the desecration of one of Savannah's most prominent families. The sweltering August heat had rendered Miss Eleanor's bedchamber nearly unbearable, yet it was not merely the temperature that caused beads of perspiration to form on young Isaiah's brow as he knelt beside the ornate mahogany bed frame that had developed an irksome creak. The boy worked diligently, his slender fingers manipulating the tools with practiced precision while maintaining the downcast eyes expected of his station. Though he could not help but feel the weight of Miss Eleanor's gaze upon him as she observed his efforts from a nearby chaise lounge, her embroidery forgotten in her lap. According to household staff testimonies collected decades later, it was Miss Eleanor who broke the customary silence, inquiring first about the nature of the repair before gradually shifting to more personal inquiries: his age, his proficiencies, whether he found the house duties preferable to field work, questions that transcended the rigid boundaries typically maintained between the planter class and those they enslaved. A fragment of Eleanor's private diary, discovered in 2008 concealed within a false drawer of her writing desk during museum restoration work, offers a disturbing glimpse into her initial impressions. The boy moves with a grace unusual for his kind, his features betraying an intelligence that seems almost out of place. When he finally raised his eyes upon my insistence, I observed they were of an extraordinary amber hue that caught the afternoon light in a most captivating manner. I confess a peculiar fascination has taken hold of me. The diary entry, dated August 17, continues with an unsettling passage wherein Eleanor reflects that Isaiah's hands reminded her of fine sculpture and that she found herself quite unable to resume my needlework long after he departed. Household records indicate that later that same evening, Miss Eleanor summoned Mrs. Pemberton, the stern housekeeper who managed domestic affairs, and requested with unusual firmness that Isaiah be permanently assigned to attend to her quarters, citing his exceptional aptitude for the delicate work her antique furnishings required. Mrs. Pemberton's reluctance, noted in her personal correspondence to her sister in Charleston, was swiftly overruled by Miss Eleanor's insistence, a decision that would set into motion a chain of events unparalleled in their tragedy and moral transgression. Colonel James Harrington first noted his daughter's peculiar interest in the slave boy during the autumn of 1847, when his military-trained eye observed Eleanor's gaze lingering uncomfortably upon Isaiah during Sunday dinner service, an observation corroborated by Reverend Thomas Blackwell, who dined with the family that evening and later recorded his discomfort in parish journals discovered during a 1973 church renovation. By Christmastide, according to testimony provided by 3 household servants during the county investigation of 1,855, Isaiah had begun to appear in garments of surprising quality, a woolen coat noticeably finer than those allocated to other house slaves, shoes that had been clearly commissioned rather than handed down, and on one occasion, a silk neckerchief that Eleanor claimed was merely a discarded remnant from her dressmaking. The house cook, Bessie May, recounted how Isaiah was inexplicably excused from the more arduous tasks typically assigned to boys his age, instead spending long hours attending to Miss Eleanor's quarters where, most alarmingly, the sound of her voice could be heard through the door as though engaged in extended conversation with the child. Mrs. Pemberton reluctantly admitted in her testimony that she had once discovered primers and writing materials hastily concealed beneath a cushion in Miss Eleanor's sitting room, suggesting the criminal act of teaching a slave to read was transpiring behind closed doors. The situation reached its inevitable confrontation in February of 1848, when Colonel Harrington, returning unexpectedly from a business engagement in Charleston, encountered Isaiah emerging from his daughter's chambers carrying what appeared to be a book. The detailed account of the subsequent confrontation, preserved in the colonel's personal correspondence with his brother-in-law in Virginia, reveals Eleanor's disturbing response to her father's thunderous reprimand. She displayed not a trace of appropriate shame, but rather defended her actions with an unnatural vehemence, declaring the boy possessed exceptional gifts of mind that would be criminal to suppress, and, most disturbingly, that she found in his company a solace no proper society has afforded me. Her attachment appears to have transcended mere charitable instruction and suggests a psychological dependence of most unwholesome character. Despite the colonel's explicit prohibition, the forbidden lessons continued with greater secrecy throughout the spring of 1848, as Eleanor transformed her afternoon reading room into a clandestine schoolhouse where, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, she committed the criminal offense of teaching an enslaved person to read and write, an act punishable by severe fines and imprisonment in Georgia, following the 1833 Anti-Literacy Act enacted after Nat Turner's Punsley Rebellion. A collection of practice sheets discovered during the 1921 renovation reveals the evolution of Isaiah's penmanship, his initial crude formations gradually refining to mirror the elegant, flowing script of his teacher with such precision that later examples became nearly indistinguishable from Eleanor's own hand, a detail that would prove significant when examining subsequent correspondence. According to the surreptitious diary kept by Esther, Eleanor's personal maid, who recorded her observations in a small leather-bound journal concealed within her sleeping pallet, recovered during a 1962 archaeological excavation of the former slave quarters. These educational sessions extended far beyond conventional academic subjects to include poetry recitations, philosophical discussions, and increasingly prolonged physical proximity that Esther described as unseemly familiar, with shoulders touching as they bend over texts, hands brushing without proper apology, and Miss Eleanor's gaze fixed upon the boy's face rather than the pages before them. The diary further recounts how Isaiah began to speak with vocabulary and elocution mirroring Eleanor's own refined manner, an alarming transformation that did not go unnoticed by the household staff who exchanged whispered concerns about the unnatural education taking place. Most disturbing were Esther's observations of Eleanor's changed demeanor, her agitation when Isaiah was assigned other duties, her insistence on taking meals privately in her quarters with him in attendance, and on one alarming occasion, Esther's discovery of Eleanor styling the boy's hair with her own silver-handled brush, an intimate act that caused such distress that the maid sought counsel from Mrs. Pemberton only to be silenced with warnings about making accusations against their mistress. By late autumn of 1848, Eleanor had orchestrated a remarkable transformation of the East Wing's architecture, as revealed in detailed surveys conducted during the 1921 renovation that uncovered a sophisticated modification to what had originally been a narrow servant's passage, connecting her bedchamber to an adjacent study, TAM. Passageway widened, refinished with wainscoting matching the main chambers, and concealed behind a sliding panel disguised as a bookcase, creating an entirely private realm beyond the oversight of household authority. This secluded sanctuary, furnished with items requisitioned from other parts of the estate including a second writing desk, a daybed upholstered in blue damask, and shelves containing volumes from the main library, became the theater of increasingly lengthy seclusions where Eleanor and Isaiah would vanish for hours, their activities shielded from scrutiny, while household ledgers recorded Eleanor's declining participation in family meals, social engagements, and even Sunday worship, absences explained away as delicate female complaints requiring rest and quiet contemplation. The household correspondence of Mrs. Pemberton reveals an atmosphere of escalating tension as Eleanor's behavior grew increasingly erratic, with explosive fits of temper directed at any servant who attempted to summon Isaiah for other duties or who dared remark upon the impropriety of their prolonged isolation. By February 1849, the situation reached a critical juncture when Colonel Harrington, alarmed by rumors circulating among neighboring plantations regarding his daughter's peculiar attachment to the slave boy, announced his intention to sell Isaiah to a cotton plantation in Alabama, prompting an episode of such hysterical distress from Eleanor that the family physician, Dr. Malcolm Sullivan, was summoned to administer sedatives. The colonel's subsequent reversal of this decision has long perplexed historians until the discovery in 2003 of a partial letter from Eleanor to her father containing veiled references to certain documents entrusted to my Charleston cousin for safekeeping, and revelations that would render your position in society untenable, suggesting a form of blackmail that effectively neutered paternal authority and granted Eleanor unprecedented autonomy over her increasingly disturbing private domain. The summer of 1849 brought a dramatic alteration to the rhythms of Harrington Plantation when, according to household ledgers from June of that year, Miss Eleanor abruptly ceased all social engagements and confined herself to her chambers with complaints of an unspecified malady requiring extended bed rest and limited contact with the household staff. Medical records from Dr. Tusse's Malcolm Sullivan, discovered in 1967 among his archived patient files during a university cataloging project, reveal the shocking truth behind this supposed illness. Detailed notes documenting Eleanor's pregnancy, including measurements of her expanding womb, prescriptions for alleviating morning sickness, and preparations for an anticipated December confinement, all while publicly maintaining the fiction of a female nervous condition exacerbated by the southern heat. The doctor's private journal expressed his profound ethical conflict, writing, "I find myself in the unconscionable position of concealing a circumstance whose revelation would destroy one of our most prominent families, yet whose nature suggests a moral transgression beyond the bounds of medical confidentiality." During this period, Isaiah was officially reassigned to the stables, a strategic removal orchestrated by Colonel Harrington, who, according to Mrs. Pemberton's correspondence, suspected but refused to acknowledge the horrifying possibility regarding his daughter's condition. However, Thomas Jenkins, a 14-year-old stable boy who would later provide testimony during the 1855 investigation, reported observing Isaiah slipping from the main house in the pre-dawn hours on multiple occasions throughout Eleanor's confinement, having apparently accessed her quarters through the servant's entrance during the night. Visits facilitated by Eleanor's personal maid Esther, who later claimed she acted under threats of severe punishment should she refuse to cooperate. As Eleanor's condition progressed, she became increasingly reclusive, with visitors categorically refused and meals delivered by only her most trusted servants, while Dr. Sullivan's records indicate weekly examinations conducted under the strictest secrecy. The birth that should have occurred in December 1849 remains conspicuously absent from all official records, including church registries, plantation birth logs, and even Dr. Sullivan's otherwise meticulous medical journals, which, after weekly entries detailing Eleanor's advancing pregnancy, fall abruptly silent between December 7th and January 18th, when he tersely notes Miss H. recovered from her female complaint and resuming limited household duties. This suspicious gap coincides with what neighboring plantation mistress Mrs. Catherine Beaumont described in correspondence to her sister in Charleston as a most peculiar occurrence at the Harrington estate, where in the dead of night, my lady's maid swears she heard the distinct cries of a newborn emanating from the east wing, followed by a commotion of hurried footsteps and, most distressingly, a sudden and complete silence thereafter. Similar accounts appear in at least 3 separate letters exchanged between prominent Savannah families in January 1850, each referencing rumors of a birth at Harrington Plantation followed by the suspicious absence of any child, speculations that were quickly suppressed in polite society through Colonel Harrington's influence but preserved in 40 private correspondence uncovered during a 1988 university archival project. Meanwhile, Isaiah's demeanor underwent a transformation noted by multiple household observers, with overseer Thaddeus Wilson recording in his February labor logs that the boy appears haunted by some internal specter, his former attentiveness replaced with a vacant stare, flinching at sudden sounds, and displaying an uncharacteristic carelessness in his duties warranting correction on multiple occasions. Most revealing is a fragment of writing discovered behind a loose brick in the servants' passage during the Pren's 1921 renovation, a partial letter written in Isaiah's hand but bearing the unmistakable stylistic influence of Eleanor's education. The angel's face I beheld for so brief a moment haunts my dreams, her tiny fingers having grasped my own with surprising strength before they took her away. I heard the muffled sounds beneath the floorboards while held captive in the storage room, powerless to intervene as my heart was interred alongside her. Miss Eleanor weeps through the night, but her tears cannot compare to the ocean of grief drowning my soul. On the 17th of April 1921, the genteel facade of Savannah's historical narrative was shattered when construction workers renovating the long-abandoned Harrington mansion for its new owners, the prominent Whitaker banking family, made a macabre discovery beneath the floorboards of the East Wing drawing room. The Savannah Morning News reported the incident with uncharacteristic directness. Workers dismantling the original heart pine flooring uncovered a small bundle wrapped in deteriorated silk and lace containing what medical examiner Dr. James Clifton has confirmed to be the skeletal remains of a newborn infant, estimated to have been deceased for no less than 70 years. Subsequent editions detailed how police investigators recovered additional evidence, including a silver rattle engraved with the letter H and fragments of what appeared to be a baptismal gown of exceptional quality, suggesting the infant had been prepared for a Christian burial before being concealed beneath the floorboards instead. Dr. Everett Morrison, a medical examiner from Charleston, invited to consult on the case due to his expertise in historical remains, submitted a report, later sealed by court order but partially leaked to the Atlanta Constitution, indicating that certain cranial and femoral characteristics of the remains suggested the infant had been of mixed racial heritage, a determination that transformed a tragic historical footnote into a potentially scandalous revelation about one of Savannah's founding families. Most puzzling to contemporary observers was the abrupt termination of the investigation less than 3 weeks after the discovery, with Police Commissioner Wilson Bradford issuing a terse statement that the matter, being of strictly historical interest and presenting no evidence of recent criminal activity, has been relegated to county archives with no further inquiry deemed necessary. The hasty conclusion prompted speculation in smaller publications like the colored Savannah Tribune, which boldly suggested powerful interests have intervened to prevent certain uncomfortable truths about our city's distinguished families from emerging. While historian Dr. Frederick Moncrief noted in his private journal that he had been explicitly denied access to the remains for further analysis despite initial approval, with his university receiving a substantial donation from an anonymous benefactor shortly thereafter. The fragile equilibrium of Harrington Plantation shattered irreparably on the 15th of March 1850, when Colonel Harrington, having evidently reached the limits of his tolerance for scandal, arranged the immediate sale of Isaiah to the Blackwood Plantation in Montgomery County, Alabama, a transaction executed with such haste that the boy was removed before dawn without opportunity for farewells or preparation. Estate records indicate Eleanor was physically restrained during Isaiah's removal, with Dr. Sullivan summoned to administer laudanum after what household staff described as a fit of hysterical madness, wherein Miss Eleanor attacked her father with unprecedented violence, tearing at his face while emitting sounds more animal than human. The Colonel's subsequent correspondence with Isaiah's new owner, Tobias Blackwood, discovered in Alabama State Archives during a 1975 digitization project, reveals the calculated cruelty of the separation. The boy, Isaiah, while displaying certain aptitudes, has been corrupted by improper influences and requires the strictest discipline to correct his unnatural pretensions. I recommend assignment to field labor exclusively, isolation from household staff, and swift correction for any displays of literacy or refined speech, signs of the corruption that necessitated his removal from my household. Dr. Sullivan's medical journal documents Eleanor's rapid psychological deterioration following Isaiah's departure, noting, Miss H. refuses nourishment, speaks to empty rooms as though addressing the departed slave child, and exhibits alarming periods of catatonia, interspersed with frantic episodes of attempting to access her father's study, where she believes sale documents are kept. Have administered bromide sedatives and recommended restraint during evening hours when her delusions intensify. Most disturbing is the doctor's April 10th entry describing his discovery of Eleanor systematically destroying her personal possessions, found Miss H. burning her wardrobe in the bedroom fireplace while repeatedly murmuring purification through fire. When questioned about her purpose, she replied with disturbing clarity, I am erasing all evidence of my existence, for I died the morning they took him, and what remains is merely a ghost with unfinished business. Throughout the early 1850 seconds, Eleanor Harrington's descent into a peculiar madness became the subject of hushed conversation throughout Savannah society, as she categorically rejected no fewer than 7 marriage proposals arranged by her increasingly desperate father, including the eligible widower Judge William Thornton, whose considerable fortune might have restored the Harrington family's dwindling finances following several failed investments in railroad ventures. Colonel Harrington's correspondence with his sister in Virginia, discovered in a collection of family papers donated to the Historical Society in 1994, reveals his mounting distress. Eleanor has developed a disturbing obsession with the departed slave boy that transcends rational explanation, refusing to acknowledge his name in conversation, yet spending hours writing letters addressed to Montgomery County that I have intercepted and destroyed. Their contents so alarming I dare not commit them to paper even in private correspondence with you, my dear sister. Despite the Colonel's vigilance, Eleanor employed increasingly elaborate methods to maintain communication, bribing traveling merchants, employing coded messages through sympathetic house servants, and on one occasion, attempting to dispatch the stable boy Thomas with a sealed packet and instructions to deliver it personally to the boy with amber eyes on Blackwood Plantation. 3 such intercepted letters, preserved by the Colonel as evidence of his daughter's derangement, and later discovered in a hidden compartment of his desk during the 1921 renovation, contain passages of disturbing opacity, with Eleanor writing, Our angel watches from beyond the veil, her tiny face appearing in my dreams demanding justice for what lies beneath the ornate Persian carpet where we once read Byron together. And in another instance, I have marked the location with my grandmother's silver hairpin pressed between the floorboards where our secret remains preserved, awaiting the day of revelation when those who have separated us will face divine judgment. Dr. Sullivan's records indicate Eleanor's physical health deteriorated in parallel with her mental state, noting her refusal of food, self-imposed isolation in the East Wing, and the development of peculiar habits, including collecting and preserving dried flowers in small cloth bundles that she would conceal throughout the house, each labeled with dates corresponding to significant events now recognizable as milestones in her relationship with Isaiah. The Blackwood Plantation records from 1851 to 1853 document Isaiah's transition from house slave to field laborer, with overseer journals detailing the boy's difficulty adjusting to grueling cotton cultivation and 3 separate escape attempts, each resulting in increasingly severe punishments recorded with clinical detachment. 20 lashes for first flight, followed by 30 lashes and 2 weeks in isolation shed for his second attempt, and most disturbingly, 50 lashes administered over 3 days, and right foot placed in iron constraint for 1 month after his third bid for freedom in October 1852. Despite Tobias Blackwood's explicit instructions to prevent Isaiah from accessing writing materials, evidence of the boy's continued literacy emerged during a 2011 examination of plantation work logs, where agricultural scholars discovered hidden messages inscribed in the margins of cotton yield records, microscopic script visible only under magnification, with fragments including "Remember E.H." and "Infant daughter rests beneath eastern floorboard," suggesting Isaiah maintained not only his literacy, but also the horrifying knowledge of what had transpired. At Harrington Plantation, a remarkable document surfaced in a collection of confiscated Confederate papers acquired by Harvard University in 1978. A ledger from Blackwood Plantation containing a list of escaped slaves from 1861 to 1863, with Isaiah's name appearing alongside the notation, believed to have absconded northward with Union scouts, possessing dangerous literacy and potential to incite others. This final documented reference to Isaiah is corroborated by Union Army enlistment records discovered in 2015. Listing a formerly enslaved man identifying himself as Isaiah Harrington, aged approximately 26, of unusual education, who joined the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment in March 1863. Military historians note that while many men of the 54th perished in the assault on Fort Wagner in July 1863, the incomplete casualty records leave Isaiah's ultimate fate uncertain, with some evidence suggesting he may have survived and relocated to Philadelphia after the war. Colonel James Harrington's death from apoplexy in December 1855 left Eleanor as the sole occupant of the once grand estate, which began a slow descent into decay as financial mismanagement gradually depleted the family fortune, with local tax records indicating a steady decline in the property's assessed value throughout the subsequent decades. Ethnographer William Simmons, who documented Savannah folklore in his 1887 collection, Southern Whispers, Tales of the Georgia Coast, recorded multiple accounts from local residents describing the increasingly eccentric behaviors of the aging spinster who came to be known among Savannah's black community as Miss Haunt, a spectral figure occasionally glimpsed through overgrown garden hedges, her once beautiful face now hollow-cheeked and wild-eyed as she wandered the grounds muttering to unseen companions. According to Simmons's interviews with former household staff, Eleanor developed peculiar nocturnal habits, including excavating shallow holes in the garden beneath her bedroom window while whispering what witnesses described as lullabies interspersed with desperate apologies, only to refill these mysterious pits before dawn and mark them with arrangements of dried flowers weighted down with small stones. Most disturbing were reports of Eleanor's fierce territoriality regarding the East Wing, where she reportedly maintained the bedroom and adjoining study in pristine condition despite the deterioration of the remainder of the mansion, keeping doors perpetually locked and flying into violent rages when workmen attempted repairs in the vicinity. The difficulty in retaining household staff reached such extremes that by the 1872nd, Eleanor relied exclusively on day workers who refused to remain after sunset, with at least 7 different maids documented in parish charity records as having abandoned employment at the Harrington estate without collecting final wages, each citing variations of the same disturbing phenomena. the distinct sounds of an infant crying emanating from within the walls of the East Wing, most audible on December nights, followed by Eleanor's hushed voice responding to the incorporeal wailing with phrases such as, "Mother is here," and "They cannot separate us again." By Eleanor's death in 1890, the mansion had acquired such a sinister reputation that it remained unoccupied for nearly 2 decades, local real estate records noting its status as unmarketable due to persistent rumors of supernatural disturbances. In the spring of 2019, the Savannah Historical Preservation Society, in collaboration with Georgia Southern University's Department of Archaeology, initiated the most comprehensive investigation of the Harrington estate ever conducted, employing advanced technologies to document the site before its scheduled renovation into a museum dedicated to antebellum architecture. Dr. Amara Washington, leading the archaeological team, deployed ground-penetrating radar across the property's 3 acres, revealing several anomalous formations beneath the house foundation that defied the original architectural blueprints preserved in county records. Most notably, an unexplained void approximately 6 feet in length situated directly beneath the East Wing drawing room where the infant remains had been discovered nearly a century earlier. The team's systematic examination of the mansion's structural elements led to the fortuitous discovery that would reignite interest in the Harrington case. During the removal of a damaged section of wainscoting in Eleanor's study, graduate student Marcus Chen observed a slight discrepancy in the wall dimensions compared to the room's exterior measurements, leading to the identification of a concealed cavity sealed behind a false panel. Within this architectural void, preserved in the dry, controlled environment that had inadvertently protected it from nearly 170 years of humidity and decay, researchers uncovered a rosewood box containing dozens of letters bound with faded blue ribbon, alongside a miniature portrait of a young boy with striking amber eyes, its gilt frame tarnished but intact. The Harrington letters represent an unprecedented primary source documentation of one of the most disturbing cases of forbidden relationships during the antebellum period, noted Dr. Washington in her preliminary report to the Georgia Historical Society, which promptly assembled an interdisciplinary team of historians, forensic experts, and literary scholars to analyze the documents whose yellowed pages, covered in 2 distinct handwriting styles, contained correspondence spanning nearly 15 years, revelation so significant that the Savannah Heritage Board immediately allocated emergency funding for a comprehensive reinvestigation of the site, including plans to carefully examine the void detected beneath the East Wing using minimally invasive archaeological techniques developed for fragile historical contexts. The methodical analysis of the Harrington letters throughout summer 2019 gradually reconstructed the horrifying truth that had remained concealed for over a century and a half, with Dr. Eliza Montgomery, the Smithsonian's textile conservation specialist, carefully separating pages fused by time, while linguistic experts authenticated the documents through comparative analysis with confirmed samples of Eleanor Harrington's writing from county records. The correspondence, primarily between Eleanor and her mother's sister, cousin Margaret Wilkinson of Charleston, who apparently provided the sole sympathetic ear within the family, revealed through oblique references and increasingly desperate confessions the full tragedy that unfolded in December 1849. According to Eleanor's letter dated the 3rd of January 1850, the birth occurred during a violent thunderstorm that masked the infant's first cries. Our daughter entered this world bearing the perfect blending of both our countenances, her skin a beautiful golden hue that proclaimed her heritage to any who might gaze upon her perfect form. The most damning evidence against Colonel Harrington emerged in Eleanor's frantic letter dated January 7th. Father discovered our secret 2 nights past when he entered unannounced during my evening feeding. The rage that contorted his features as he beheld his granddaughter at my breast transformed him into a stranger before my eyes. He tore my angel from my arms with such violence that her pitiful cries echo still in my tortured mind. The final revelation appeared in a letter dated January 10th, where Eleanor wrote, What my father has done cannot be committed fully to paper lest this correspondence be discovered, but know that he worked alone by candlelight beneath the floorboards of my sitting room, where now I tread daily above her eternal cradle, the Persian carpet concealing his sin from the world while he proclaims to all that my illness continues and no child ever existed. Subsequent letters document Eleanor's desperate attempts to reach Isaiah with news of their daughter's fate, suggesting she maintained the pristine condition of the East Wing as a memorial to the child whose name, Evangeline Hope, appears repeatedly throughout the later correspondence, alongside references to our eternal bond that neither distance nor death can sever. The final chapter of the Harrington tragedy unfolded in January 2020, when advanced DNA sequencing techniques applied to the preserved infant remains yielded conclusive evidence that stunned even seasoned historical researchers, with Dr. Ramirez of the Georgetown University Forensic Anthropology Department confirming genetic markers consistent with mixed European and West African ancestry that, when compared against DNA samples voluntarily provided by 5 living Harrington descendants, established beyond scientific doubt that the infant was indeed the child of Eleanor Harrington and Isaiah. This confirmation coincided with the remarkable discovery of additional correspondence in the Margaret Wilkinson family archives in Charleston, where renovations of the historic home revealed a hidden compartment in an heirloom writing desk containing what appears to be Isaiah's final communication to Eleanor. Smuggled to her through Margaret's assistance sometime in 1867, a letter written in the refined script Eleanor had taught him, reading, "I live now as Isaiah Freeman in Philadelphia, having survived the war that brought liberation but not equality, working as a teacher among our people, while carrying always the memory of you and our daughter, whose face I beheld only once, but will recognize instantly when we meet in the world beyond this one." Most astonishing was the appended letter's conclusion, which mentioned Isaiah's marriage to a free woman named Sarah and the birth of their son, whom he had named Harrington Freeman to ensure our shared blood continues even as the circumstances of its joining must remain forever unspoken. The investigation's most poignant revelation emerged through potent genealogical research conducted by Dr. Washington's team, which identified potential descendants of both Eleanor Harrington, through her brother's lineage, and Isaiah Freeman, living unknowingly within 50 miles of each other in present-day Maryland, including Professor Thomas Harrington of Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Eliza Freeman Jackson of the National Archives, professional colleagues who had collaborated on historical preservation projects for over a decade without any awareness of their potentially shared ancestry. When presented with the research findings, both scholars declined genetic testing that would confirm their connection to the Savannah tragedy, with Dr. Freeman Jackson telling reporters, "Some wounds in our national history are too profound to be reduced to scientific certainty. Sometimes the mystery itself preserves the dignity of those who suffered in silence," leaving the final chapter of this extraordinary historical narrative suspended in an ambiguity that perhaps best honors its complex legacy.